Welcome everybody for thanks for joining us. We've got an exciting topic for today. The key marketing trends to get ahead for 2024. My name's Jason Hubbard. I'm COO at RevGenius. We have Ashley Topping with us. She's head of marketing at Exclaimer. We have Sydney Waterfall, SVP of marketing at Refine Labs. So a great panel here to talk through these trends. We were doing a little bit of light chatting around this before we hopped on, and everybody had all kinds of great stuff to say. So, I think there's going to be some amazing content in here, and excited to jump in on all of the stuff with everybody. Ashley, I'll hand it over to you to do help guide the conversation a little bit. We can hop right into it.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Excited to join everyone here today at the top of the new year. I'm sure everyone is hot on the trail of 2024. I actually read an article on LinkedIn last night, or a meme rather, that was like, I'm sure everyone has their 2024 plans well underway. If not, we're all just drinking wine. And I had a chuckle here because, it's very true here. But some of the key challenges that marketers are facing around the world, I think, are very relevant to maybe level set first before we dive into the solutions that we're building against our plans. And so I thought maybe we kickstart the conversation around those challenges with, we're seeing this year customer behaviors change, the way that our customers are communicating and communicating with us, and increasing competition. If it's a very fragmented landscape and how they're communicating amongst that landscape, the average person spends about 7 hours a day on a screen. And so the form of content that is required to deliver to our customers is changing and needs to change. And things, content saturation, brand reputation, ROI measurement. These are all challenges that we're seeing our customers face on average. Jason, Sydney, what kind of challenges are you seeing from your guys' side?
Sydney, I'll let you kick that off.
Sure. These three buckets of challenges I see across all. Oh, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. All these three buckets come up time and time again, and in different, I would say, severity or different magnitude, depending on the company or the stage of market that you're in. And that's definitely going to be measurement. How do you measure ROI? How do you track revenue? How do you measure marketing's impact, holistically as a business? And how do you report that up to a board? But then even more tactically, how does the campaign manager or the social media manager know what they're doing is impacting the business, and how can they speak to that? So kind of full level there. The second topic is content creation, something I could talk about for a long time, and I'm sure we'll get into different types of content, what's working and what's not, what brands are thinking about and changing for 2024, and then also just the distribution of all of the content through different channels. How are they streamlining channels? How are they experimenting with new channels? And what they're saying no to? So I think those are the biggest buckets of things that I see across every business conversations we're having with all of our clients right now.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm seeing all of those things, and I get a little bit of a unique perspective. On the RevGenius side, of course, we work with sponsors, partners that are doing events like this, and so working directly with demand gen and marketing teams there. Also run a growth marketing agency on the side where we actually do the execution of a lot of campaigns and stuff like that. And so it gives me a interesting perspective and take on it, where I get to have an insight into a lot of different companies. And I think it's important to to pause and acknowledge the context that's driving most of these things we're talking about, which is what's happened over the last year and a half or so, where markets and lending tightened up. Started, and we had to get away just by the nature of it from growth at all costs, which has really driven the industry for the last decade and a half plus. And so whenever you do that, volume stops becoming the primary interest, and quality, ROI, actually driving to revenue become, hugely, hugely important. And it's that ROI piece that I see, pretty universally across the board. And it's moving marketing and campaigns and initiatives further down funnel and closer to revenue. And it's also driving companies to have tighter alignment between their sales, go-to-market, demand gen, and marketing teams. And so I think all of that gets wrapped and rolled into the specific campaigns or types of content or marketing initiatives that you're creating, that you led with there, Sydney.
Awesome. I couldn't agree more. And of course, feel free to pop in as we chat along here. If you guys have any additional challenges that you're seeing from your companies, we'd love to hear from you as well, and address some of those issues along the way. First of all, Sydney, you brought up a great point. I think that the comment around what are we saying no to? I think that that's an interesting point. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? I think we're all finding that just right before we jumped on, we were having an interesting, really good conversation around this. Talk to me a little bit more around what you mean by that.
Focus is what I mean. And if I could boil it down to one word. So we always try to practice what we preach at Refine Labs internally. And then with our clients, we try to showcase the best way, in our opinion, to do something, model that, and kind of build the playbook. So we're also thinking about this internally. Some of the things for our Marketing 2024 plan that we've said no to due to resourcing, time, also like we're only going to try one new thing at a time. We're not going to try multiple new things at the same time, because whenever you're standing up something new, even if it's on an existing channel, right? It's a new strategy or a new tactic on an existing channel that you're wanting to try. We recommend to do one at a time, net new. So then you can really put all your effort into that, understand if it's working before you go try 3 to 4 things. And then at the end of the day, you say, oh, well, email has been growing, but we've tried 4 things and we're not really sure what exactly drove the most increase in that, whatever results that we got. So for us, the one thing that we're doing at a time is we're standing up a new short form content series. And I'll give you a tactical example of this. One of our goals at Refine Labs this year is to stand up a content pillar outside of our founder brand and really lean into building the brand of Refine Labs through multiple faces and multiple people. We are a service-based company, obviously, so people are our differentiator, right? And so we want to highlight our differentiators through our people. We're standing up a new short form content series, but we're only posting it on LinkedIn and YouTube. We're not doing a podcast. We're known for podcasts. We said no to podcasts. We're not doing it. We're not doing an email newsletter. I said no. We need to prove out that we can stand up this new content pillar. We need to prove the audience likes it. We need to get that validation from the market. And we need to build the systems and build the muscle internally before we go adding new distribution channels. Adding frequency is another lever. So we're going to start at once a week. We could go to twice a week. I said, absolutely not. We're starting at once a week. We're trying this and we're going to prove this out as like a proof of concept. And then if we get the response from the market, we start seeing views and engagement go up. We start seeing our inbound come in through that series or interactions with that series. Then we will have the conversation of how do we scale this. But immediately at the conversation was like, let's do all of the things. Even, even internally, this happens. I'm sure everybody in the audience can relate to that. And you just have to say no. And we will do that when we hit this guardrail. And I think that's the key kind of takeaway internally that you could use, is to have guardrails of when you might start, stop, or scale.
Awesome. I love that. Start, stop, or scale is a great concept to take away. If you take nothing else away from today's conversation, I love the stop, start, or scale, and inserting those milestones of when you stop, start, or scale. And the simplicity too, because I'm so guilty of this as well, of wanting to, when you have a new idea, wanting to just like do it all, right? Because you get excited. And so it's important though to start small and prove out the point, right? And
I get excited too. I had to reel myself back in. I built out this great plan, and I had all these, this is how we're going to scale it. These are the distribution channels. And I had to like walk away. I had to come back and be like, what's actually realistic? I had to like put myself in check a little. So I think that's also a good exercise for marketers, to say, this is the dreamland, but let's go to what's realistic given our resources, given our budget, all of the variables that you might have.
We do a lot of mapping too, like where we put everything out, right? But then we timeline it and things too, because I think that one of the lessons learned at Exclaimer is that it is easy to take on too much. And so let's start to actually map. Just because we have all of the ideas doesn't mean it has to happen in quarter, but rather maybe only 2 of those ideas happen this quarter. And once we've proved that this is the right activity or event, if you will, for us, or piece of content, then we'll continue on the next 2. So prioritize and lay it out that way. And actually, it almost makes planning a lot easier for us. So we actually have a question in from Megan for you, Sydney,
Sure.
based on the conversation that we're having right now. So I want to actually bring it up right now because it's very relevant as a services-based organization trying to leverage your people to build out your own brand. How do you deal with the pushback on, I don't have enough time for this? Solo marketer here trying to leverage in-house SMEs, but facing roadblocks.
This is a great question, and it's something that I struggle with as well. And we're trying to, yes, I will just be honest with you. Everyone thinks, oh, you have it easy because you work with marketers. We probably have it a little bit easier than other industries for sure, or other personas. But there's 2 things that we are doing. I look at internal subject matter expertise the same way I would look at a subject matter expert externally. To me, it doesn't matter if we're working with another brand and another subject matter co-marketing initiative, partnership, or if we're working with an internal subject matter expertise. That just kind of helps put me in the mindset of like, how would you treat someone externally? How would you enable them in a partnership? How would you enable them like in an event like this or something like that? And that's how I like to think about internal subject matter expertise. The number one thing that comes up for me is I'm too busy. Clients always come first. That's how we make money. Clients are always going to come first. So how do I incentivize or help the team want to participate? First, you have to want to participate. It's a lot easier when you get someone to want to participate than forcing them. So we do a couple of things here at Refine Labs. Timeline is key. We push out timelines. Hey, we'd love for you to participate in this. We want to do a video and a topic around this, or event around Stacking Growth Live is one of our content pillars where we highlight a lot of SMEs. But I give them a lot of time, a heads up, usually like at least 2 weeks to a month, so they can plan that into their client workflow or their bandwidth. So timing is huge. So you got to kind of be ahead of the curve with your plan a little bit. And the second thing is kind of incentives. We've tried a bunch of different things at Refine Labs. We have a product called the Vault. So if people participate in the Vault, it's kind of outside of their normal responsibilities. And we of course, we recognize that internally, but we also compensate them for that. We rolled that out last year. If you're going to go above and beyond what is asked in you in your role, we will compensate for that. Just the same way you might compensate someone else externally for doing a post or engaging in a webinar or producing a piece of content for you. So we've rolled that out. That has been helpful. Some people are motivated by that. Some people are not. And then the last thing is we try to also give them what's in it for them. We work side by side with our SMEs to build their personal brand and help them and feature them. I will feature people on my profile or certain profiles that have more following to help give them reach and help give them kind of a jump start, which is going to do nothing but good things for their career or their personal brand in the long run. So those are kind of the three things: timelines, planning, incentives, and then what's in it for them. We have some SMEs that just, really want a special reward or a special gift versus the public recognition, right? So really taking that approach.
That's great. I 100% agree with all of those. As a current COO, even though I spent most of my career in marketing and demand gen, you might imagine operationalizing it is one of the biggest levers that I try and pull with it. And I get to do that on a daily basis, both internally and with externals, both on the side of RevGenius, we're working with partners, sponsors, as well as, on the side of my agency. And internally, the things I found most effective are if that's something you want them doing, then make sure that that's actually part of what they're measured on, what they're comped on, what the expectations of where they're allocating their time and their bandwidth are. And simply by measuring and reviewing with them that, it's human nature. If something's being measured, you're going to work harder at it and prioritize it more. When you work with external, individuals or companies, organizations, because of course you don't have that level of control with it and stuff. But the lessons that I found on that side are equally applicable internally, which is, break it up into steps. Templatize things when you can. Put timelines on not just the end product or the deliverable, but those individual steps in between. I had to learn a lot of these lessons the hard way when I was working on, my master's and doctorate, where I was turned loose for, a semester or a year on end, and you just had to deliver something. And so if you didn't find ways to keep yourself on track and make sure that you're measuring these things and, knowing where you're at and all of that, then you're never going to get any of it done. And so, operationalizing things in kind of every way that you can within that. And one of the other benefits of breaking out into those individual steps and timelines with it is a lot of times it'll help you identify where you've got friction points, where are people really struggling, and then that gives you an indication of where you should really spend time and energy on trying to figure out, all right, how do we make that smoother? How do we make that easier? How do we enable that piece of it so that people don't get hung up on those steps?
I totally agree. I think one other piece too that I've done, piggybacking on the operationalizing side of things, is also tying to KPIs and the overarching company goals even. Because a lot of times if you take a look at what the company's trying to accomplish, there's ways that you can even piggyback and say hey, I see that, OKR that you are trying to accomplish, and guess what, I can help you accomplish that through you participating in this upcoming webinar that I've got, or things. And so it's a win-win situation.
Yeah. And I think it's important because from the perspective of the SME that you're asking to do this, if you either cannot connect the dots as far as how this is driving towards a company goal, or you can't be bothered to actually track and report on how it's affecting or influencing those things, then it's very rightfully and understandably for them to have an attitude of it's not that important. And so why should I prioritize this if it's not a higher priority for you, or it's not tied into actually company goals and metrics that they're trying to drive?
Totally. Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's a lot of chatter in the chat. And one of the things that I talked about as being an issue was content saturation when we first kicked off the call. And one of the things that we're seeing at Exclaimer is the need for personalization and really humanizing not only the customer journey and the experience that we're providing, but also through our content. And so it ties to a comment that was made about newsletters going away and things. And so I just kind of want to open up the table here and see what you guys are doing from a personalization standpoint. What does that mean for you, Jason, at Rev Genius and things?
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking about this right before we hopped on. I think the answer to so many of these things is best practices we've known for a very long time. And personalization and quality of what we're putting out there has been a best practice we've all known for a long time. So as content is king, and so none of these things should be like shocking surprises or anything like that. We're just, the chicken sort of came home to roost, and all those things that were sort of aspirational best practices have now sort of become, for most people, organizations, have to do's. But the customization, the personalization, all of those things, I think, are also tied into, and it's where one of the things I'm really excited about what's going on right now. The sort of the corollary to all the stuff that we're talking about, that's really on the enablement of doing these things at a higher level of sophistication and efficiency, because we of course have access to more and more data that's out there. And part of that data is intent signaling around what these people are actually interested in, what their hot buttons are, what pain points they're trying to solve for, and things like that. And so whenever you can start connecting those dots and being able to serve up customized, personalized content relative to those intent signals, and go beyond just broad-based ICP and persona type information, actually start getting into, what are you seeing from people's behavior? What are they posting on? What are, job descriptions they were hired for, moves that the companies are making, things like that. And I mean, it was incredibly powerful what I was able to do when I was at Astronomer running growth, because Astronomer is a highly technical product, data orchestration, and we're built on and owned the open source Airflow project. And the upshot of that is we were creating all of the publicly available documentation, guides, all of that stuff around the open source Airflow project. And so we had, to the tune of 8,000 net new companies a month coming and consuming that highly technical documentation. And so I was then able to roll that into and start serving customized ads, serving up customized content. And oftentimes, by the time a rep actually got on a call with them, I was able to say, like, hey, they're struggling with this. This is what they're trying to solve for. This is the tech they're trying to plug into. And like, they were equipped with that information going into that call. And a lot of that was through, and it becomes a feedback loop. You get that customized, personalized content out there, and you look at how they're engaging with it, what they're engaging with. And so it starts generating first party intent signals that you can go and roll back into this and continue to optimize both, across your content and your campaigns, but also relative to that individual in that company.
I totally agree. And I think that at the core of what you're speaking to is the quality of the content that you're delivering to the people that you're engaging with. And thus why you're, delivering engagement along, right? So, which is, another key point that we were talking to earlier, because I think that this drives the need to focus, the need, to your point, of only on those two things, right? If we're focused so much on quantity, we're getting away from that overarching quality of content that we're trying to drive, even right down to the campaigns and things. And I know that even with my team here at Exclaimer, we are really doubling down, and it's 2 campaigns. That's it. Nothing else, 2 campaigns, because, it's what are we, delivering? Are we delivering the most valuable things out to our customers and prospects, or are we just like doing it to check a box for the sake of doing it, so we can showcase that, look at me, kind of thing, that look at what we did. That's not what this is about, and things. So, Sydney, what about you?
I love the quantity versus quality. I mean, now that you have AI, you can push out blog posts all day if you want. And so quality content is actually going to become quality, and like unique content is going to be much more important. That's like an obvious statement, but the kind of way to execute that, when I think of segmentation and how do you personalize, one thing that we've found very successful, most people will personalize based on firmographic data that they have. And if they have that, third party intent, great. They're going to kind of guess at the people at the account that might be doing that, right? Which is better than nothing, right? You're like trying to take them in a certain direction. First party intent is holy grail. So once you have first party intent, use it. Once they become known to you, and once they, are on different things, what we've done with a lot of our clients specifically, like how do you operationalize this and try to get stuff out on paid and organic, and how do those two work together, is personalize your content by use case and problem. Not necessarily, and then we distribute that to multiple personas, multiple industries, multiple firmographic, mid-market, enterprise, whatever segments are very important to the business, because then you can learn like what are those things that these segments care the most about versus we made this piece of content specifically for this segment. Awesome. They could not care less maybe about that. And you don't know that. You're kind of just guessing. So we really recommend at the content level, for majority of our content, we look at problems and use cases. And then we distribute that out. And then we understand what are the types of people, companies that are gravitated towards what. And then that will kind of help us inform what we might produce next for that specific segment. I think a lot of times people get caught up in, well, they're a decision maker. They don't care about, the technical, how this product works. And I'm like, well, I am a very technical person and I love technical stuff, but you might see my title and be like, nope, she doesn't care. I'm like, I care. And I like, that's maybe a segment that I get in the weeds, right? Versus maybe another person does different, cares about something a little bit different that might have the same exact title, same exact company size, same exact industry. So my recommendation is focus on use cases and problems to understand your segmentation first versus maybe the more traditional firmographic way.
No, I love that. And it's something that I've come to refer to as engineering intent signaling, creating content and opportunities for engagement where it'd be really, really weird if they didn't actually have that intent or that wasn't a priority or an interest for them. And so whenever you start creating things like that and getting that out in front of them and able to track that engagement with it, it gives you unbelievable first party intent signals.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny. I'm also a big nerd when it comes to like technical. And I think it comes from like where you came from too, right? And so like I've worked for like super small companies, and so you've had to be technical, but people don't always know that or realize that. And so I get in the weeds on that kind of stuff. And so you can't assume buyer behavior always. So I think that taking that use case and problem approach is the right approach when creating content, as opposed to just being the, ideal persona, kind of thing, which is not always typical. So I love that idea. I think it all leads nicely into the ROI conversation, which Jason, you spoke to as being one of the core components in trends in 2024 that marketers are really focusing on this year. Talk to me a little bit more what your thoughts are around that.
Yeah, I'll start with what I think is an underappreciated challenge relative to this, and it's an extension of every marketer, demand gen person's Achilles heel or worst enemy, which is attribution to begin with. I mean, attribution is complicated. It's hard to do. It's hard to do right. But an extension of that is I think we all got enamored with both in the transition to digital as well as sort of the growth at all cost side of things of straight line attribution, straight line being, hey, we ran this event, these people showed up to the webinar, we then converted them into an opportunity and closed deal. And so it's like, it's a straight line from that person to revenue. But obviously, any marketer that's been at this for a while or worth their salt knows that's the tip of the iceberg. That's a piece of the puzzle of what's going on. And so I see people underappreciating both the multi-touch side of attribution, which opens up a whole nother can of worms of how do you actually go and implement, track, all of that stuff on a multi-touch. But let's all at least acknowledge it's all of those touches combined that drive the results, as well as the complexity around what happens outside of what you can actually track and attribute. And we've done this with Rev Genius, where we actually got a peek under the hood with some of our clients or partners that we've done stuff with, and we were able to say, okay, it begins with direct attribution. You paid this, you got this amount of revenue out of it. Your ROI was there, but it wasn't anything to like write home about or be super excited about. But hey, let's look at the correlation of what happened. We began running these campaigns. At this point, we were pointing primarily to these internal pages on your site. We were serving up, these use cases, stuff like that. What happened relative to those that correlates to the timing of the beginning, the end of those campaigns, as well as the individual promotional pushes and stuff like that relative to it. And whenever we did that, it was like, holy crap, like, all indications from a correlation standpoint is that it was 4 to 5x what you were seeing from a direct attribution side of things. And so all of this stuff needs to come with a level of sophistication that I think a lot of us are, behind the curve on actually being able to get our arms around and be able to implement. And, the challenge and the fear there is if you do that, you wind up missing really, really good opportunities that are out there. You wind up leaning possibly harder on models or campaigns that lend themselves more to that direct attribution model, like paid campaigns in particular. And I'm seeing that. I'm seeing allocation of budget and priority of paid campaigns steadily climbing over the last year and a half or so. And I think that's probably the primary driver of that is like, hey, this is the easiest thing for me to go in and demonstrate and show. I actually drove X, Y, or Z from this. And so, and then, the other piece to it is if you're going to move demand gen and marketing further down funnel and closer to revenue, I mentioned this earlier, you've got to get tighter alignment between these teams. And, in a lot of cases, it may be two teams, marketing, demand gen are kind of synonymous, and then you've got the sales side of it. And others, it could be even more, fragmented, where you've got marketing, demand gen, you've got like a BDR team, which is a layer in between that and sales. And then you've got sales, and maybe you're even really sophisticated and you're going all the way down to CS and, focusing on NRR. But as with anything, the more people you bring into this and the more priorities and things you're doing, the more complex all of this gets. And so you've got to get more and more sophisticated with this, both from a operational process standpoint, from a tech stack standpoint, as well as the one that everybody really focuses on, which is just getting philosophical alignment between these teams and the organization with it. And so, again, all these things that we've known for a long time, we just kind of got away with easy buttons and being able to not focus on them to the degree that we needed to. But all of this requires a relatively steep learning curve on these things to be able to go and figure out how to actually pull all of this together.
I totally agree. That cross-functional alignment is sometimes the hardest part, right? It shouldn't be, but it is, because I think that it's easy to silo, especially post-COVID, where we're seeing lots of teams be virtual and things. And so it's easy to just, be in our virtual worlds, as we all are even currently today, right? So I think that getting that alignment up front to ensure what we're even tracking and what that success metric looks like is really, really important. Sydney, when it comes to Refine Labs, what are you guys doing? How are you driving alignment for your ROI and success metrics and things?
So I love measurement. It's like one of my things I could talk about for 3 hours. So I'll try to keep it brief here. But we really kind of help guide our clients to kind of switch their mindset around measurement and the core KPIs to look at. So it's no longer a question of like, what did this campaign drive? And it's more, we start at the global level. So from an ROI perspective, here's kind of how we break this down and recommend. So we first started out with doing like, what's just the ROI and of our marketing efforts coming through the website? We call that declared intent coming through our website. That's like the holy grail. And if you scale that in a great way, then you are doing good things. When you do that, though, a lot of the individual campaigns or the individual channels become less directly attributable, right? Because it's less performance-based marketing. And it's more of what we call the category of creating demand versus capturing demand, where you're just in a more performance-based model. So at a high level, we actually go even up a higher level than that when we start looking at how is the business performing relative to the marketing or go-to-market strategy. So a leading indicator of that is going to be how much qualified pipeline dollars divided by our marketing program dollars, which is going to be our variable spend. We also look at that same calculation with total marketing dollars, including headcount, to give us a baseline. How is this business performing from all the revenue that they're driving from all sources to level set versus the marketing expense? That just gives us a baseline. And then the lagging indicator, of course, is revenue, but depending on your sales cycle and things, that's a little harder to predict and longer to get into a baseline. So the lagging indicator is the same thing. All revenue dollars divided by total marketing dollars, just give you a baseline. Marketing program, CAC, those types of things. But then we get into, okay, what's going on with all of our efforts to drive things through the website? The reason, I'll just call out the reason we look at what quote unquote all bound first is because a lot of people are deploying integrated campaigns that affect outbound, ABM type of campaigns. And they're also doing a lot of content creation and a lot of what we call demand creation. So it's good to look at that all bound. Then we start breaking that down into sub layers. What's going on with the website, and then what's going on with specific channels. We measure channels differently depending on the intent of how you're using the channel. If you're using a capture demand channel, there's a direct ROI calculation associated to it. If you're measuring a create demand channel, we again measure that as best we can with multi-touch or website visits, but a lot of that is going to come through organic, direct, and branded paid search. So again, we kind of go back and look at that correlation. We spent this, we shift the strategy here, we tried this one thing here, and did our website inbound correlate and go up from those sources? So that's kind of a high level. I would say from a paid perspective, just in what you were going through, we are seeing a lot of companies invest more in capture demand. What does that mean? Google Ads, lead gen, review sites, all of those, types of channels. But that means it's getting more competitive, which means it's getting more expensive, and you're not getting what you used to get out of those channels for the same cost. So then that sends the alarms off internally. Oh my God, what are we doing? We're not getting our 30 leads, our 30 high intent leads that we used to get from Google Ads. Or we are, but it's costing a lot more. So we push our clients, and we highly recommend of like, well, we need to scale back in something that is a baseline. Like, we're not going to go over this cost per qualified demo meeting or this cost per qualified demo opportunity. Once it gets above this cost, it's just not sustainable. And that's the state of the business. And instead, we're going to take this opportunity to invest in video, reach awareness ads, because those CPMs have been going down because less people are spending on there. And in the background, you should also be doing things on organic. This is not a paid rant, but this is to kind of set the stage there of what has been working. The challenge with that is you have to have confidence, and you have to have the right measurement. You have to say, we are going to do this, and we should see this come through organic, direct, blended sources. We should see our blended sourced revenue or blended source conversion go up. It's just not going to be directly attributed. And my last thing I will say, because I know I'm going long here and I said it would be short, is we also recommend self-reported attribution. If you follow me or Refine Labs on social, you've probably heard us talk about this. A lot of people talk about it. Literally, I just got a self-reported attribution for a Vault sign up that said Sydney Waterfall's talk on RevGenius. Is that attributed to RevGenius? No, but now it is. So I'm not lying. It's right here. Shout out to Noah, who was on live. But there's also a quantitative. You have to pair the qualitative with your quantitative. So self-report attribution, having your sales rep ask, hey, how did you hear about X? Or what kind of things do you love about the brand in the sales calls? Then I think that's another data point that you could use, and you could also use surveys.
Yeah, one thing really quick to drop in there, it's fascinating to hear what you said about the paid side of things, because we've encountered the same thing with Demand Magic, where all but 2 of our clients, we began by taking over their paid campaigns and managing those. And universally in every one of those, we've had to shift the model from just siloed campaign management to, we start working very tightly with the internal teams and resources. If they've got a content team, if they've got a social media team, if they've got a BDR team, stuff like that. And then we've added and built out our services to be able to backfill kind of wherever they're missing, so that we can actually run those multi-channel, cross-functional campaigns, both through a combination of working with them internally and what we offer is fractional services and stuff like that. But the other piece to it that has been remarkable is running bottom of the funnel, demand capture ads cold at audiences that have not had engagement or nurturing or anything like that has become cost prohibitive for most organizations, most products. And so you don't really have a choice but to run a more sophisticated full funnel type campaign, even if you're just doing paid, where you're serving up, awareness ads, you're serving up, video ads, stuff like that have a much lower cost to them. And then you're capturing intent off of that and being able to refine down and narrow down that audience that you're serving up those more expensive demand capture ads too. And so seeing the exact same thing on our side, all the way to the point where we've had to really kind of retool our offerings and our philosophical approach to what we're doing with clients.
That's awesome. No, I think that's something that we are seeing as well. One of the comments that you made at the start, Sydney, and I know we've got some questions that are funneling up here in the chat as well, and I promise I'm going to get to them, but I want to make sure we get to this last point here is brand. And one of the things that I think is a key priority for marketers is really ensuring brand trust through everything that they're doing. And so I know we've talked a lot about a lot of different things today, through content creation, through quality, through ROI and measurement. But I think through everything that we're doing as marketers, ensuring that brand trust while differentiating ourselves, making sure that we're breaking through the noise and all of the things, but maintaining our brand identity and things too is really important when we're putting ourselves out into the market and being known. And so, Sydney, I want to start with you, because I know that with all of the changes at Refine Labs, this is a big initiative for you. And so I want you to talk to me a little bit about how you guys are maintaining at the core that trust and what that means for Refine Labs.
Yeah, we're transitioning right now. We have a huge founder brand. If you've heard of Chris Walker, he's our founder and CEO. He has a gigantic following, which he's built over the last 3 to 4 years. And he's now investing and doing other things outside of Refine Labs. So it used to be synonymous. Chris Walker used to be synonymous with Refine Labs, but in the future, that's not going to be the case. And this may happen if you have a large personal brand in-house or a large SME. Also, this is what people are very afraid of, to like invest in personal brands. And they say, oh, what if they leave the company, or what if they start doing other things? And here's how we look at it. And here's what we are doing is Chris's content specifically is our strategic narrative. It's thought leadership. It's very more high level in the market. Our area that we really are focusing on for 2024 is the 2 layers underneath the onion, I would say, like underneath typically what Chris might talk about and things like that, which he still will. But okay, everybody gets the foundational concept, or we are introducing a new concept, a new term to the market. Great. But what does that mean? More dedicated advice, more tactical type of content has worked really well for us in the past, in the early days. And so we're kind of bringing that lever back through our subject matter experts in our personal content strategy. Obviously, this is unique to our situation, so it might not directly apply. But when we looked at, said, what are we serving? We have content that's doing very well at thought leadership, getting our concepts, evangelizing the category, evangelizing our strategic narrative. We also have a ton of content that is very, very tactical and like step by step in our product called The Vault. But we need to fill this middle where we can service multiple people. Our buyer is normally a CMO or a VP, so it needs to service them. Our day-to-day contact is normally a director of demand gen, so it needs to service them. And we also need to service campaign managers and paid media managers and more of the executors as well. So we're really focused on filling that pillar of the market with our content. That becomes what Refine Labs is known for in 2024. So that's really what we're trying to do from a content strategy and how we build the brand and accelerate the brand, and highlighting more faces, more people, and kind of getting into maybe some topics and more specifics than we have in the past. Again, kind of going a little bit deeper.
We're doing some of the very same things at Exclaimer as well. And some of those core narratives we've really refined. And I think that we've probably had some of the very same conversations of peeling that onion back and really diving deeper. I think that also establishing some of those brand champions internally, and really kind of like pushing them off the cliff, if you will, to like just, start publishing and things, leveraging tools and technology to help make it easier too, I think is really important. We've launched some new internal tools to help the entire company be able to do that as well, so that it still helps maintain that, core narrative that we're trying to stay true to, which I think is really important. Because I think always that first step is where sometimes marketers get nervous about is, well, I don't necessarily want sales writing, XYZ, or I don't want so-and-so writing that because they might say the wrong thing. But now, through technology, we can actually like tee up different posts and things, right, for them. And then they can actually massage the language and make it their own, which is great because they can, do things a lot faster, schedule the posts on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever the case may be. But it's still, tied back to the core narrative that we're trying to actually communicate out to our brand, which is great. Jason, what about you?
Well, I loved what you're talking about as far as operationalizing it. It was obviously very close to my heart. If you want somebody to do something, make it as easy for them to do and execute against as humanly possible. Because the more friction that there is there, the harder it's going to be. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody's on the same page and agreement that part of the upshot of moving away from growth at all cost is that everybody has had to start focusing on quality as opposed to quantity. Growth at all cost meant that we could throw enough high enough volume, enough numbers at something, and something sufficient and interesting would come out the other side of it. And I think brand recognition, brand trust, stuff like that is a perfect example of that. Where and it's represented in how many companies went and chased the wrong personas, the wrong use cases and stuff like that to build revenue that was never going to be a fit, and then it turned into churn. Well, that churn obviously translated into a lack or a loss of brand recognition, brand trust within that. And so the corollary to that is if we're getting away from that, we're actually paying attention to NRR and that fit and stuff like that. It also entails that we're focusing more on that brand equity that's out there and working to protect and build that. And so all of these things are interrelated to each other, but you don't have a choice but to do that if you're really starting to focus on that actual return on investment, especially if you're going all the way down to NRR with it.
I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree. I think the other big thing for us at Exclaimer is that we're all influencers and we're all part of this, collaborative growth and community. Like we can create our own community, if you will. And so, Sydney, I love what you said about Chris and things, because I think that while it's true, people may go on and leave. And I often joke about this, even with my own team, right? Like I am a responsible leader and I lead with the legacy mindset of like, I want to create the best leaders I possibly can, and you better not ever leave me, right? However, the reality of it is they're not going to be with me forever. And so, the intent is that I make them the best people at Exclaimer while they're here. And so creating brand ambassadors is part of that. And so I think that if they can go out and represent our brand, and if at the core of that, they are talking about how they ran a really awesome ABM program here, they should be doing that, right? Because that just helps further showcase us as thought leaders and things. So I know we've got a question here around, let's see, attribution. So James says, it sounds like we're still trying to make an argument against fractional attribution because it's still too hard. Is there truth to that? If we're still inventing ROI KPIs to justify media services, are we really helping? Jason, I'm going to put that one to you.
I'm actually going to point back to Sydney because I loved that approach that you brought to it, as far as trying to look at holistically what's the budget and where's the allocation of manpower and resources, and what impact is that having on pipeline, because I think that's arguably one of the best formulas and philosophical ways of approaching that of anybody that I've heard, trying to crack the nut on what is a obviously very difficult problem. So I'm absolutely going to be taking that away from this conversation and this session with it. But I think the upshot of that is, and it's a perfect example of, you've got to get creative with it, and you also need to be constantly testing what that model is and how you're measuring it. And so whether you're doing that through a big, expensive, complex attribution tool where you've gone and you've built out and weighted all of your multi-touches and all of that stuff, or you're doing something that's kind of a bigger picture model like you had suggested, Sydney, those things are exactly what they are, what they're called. They're a model. And so a model always needs to be reviewed, tested, optimized, and all of that stuff. And so, I think what you're hearing in this is not that we shouldn't be doing it because it's complex. It's just an acknowledgement of the inherent complexity of it, and that you've got to get sophisticated with and creative with how you actually approach that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is deciding on a model and having alignment on that model. Step one at the executive level and the board level, depending if you're funded or not, right? Because that's where it all breaks down if they're not aligned. So that's really what we've been working with companies to say, okay, this is how we're going to change this strategy. We acknowledge that everything is not attributable. We acknowledge this model will tell us this things. We acknowledge this model will tell us this things, and here's how we are going to use those models. But at the core business level, we are going to use this funnel tracking data model to understand our funnel, and we are going to use this calculation to measure and optimize our go-to-market levers. And that's kind of what I was speaking about, that high level of like benchmarking. Okay, here's how many marketing total dollars we're spending. Here's how many all bound net new revenue we're spending. What's that benchmark? How are we improving that over time? Then maybe you use a multi-touch model when you're in the demand team and you're trying to optimize the tactics and you're trying to optimize the content and, you know, in the nitty gritty. So
totally. And I'm with you, Jason. I was like quickly scribbling down as Sydney was talking. I was like, oh, I agree.
Maybe I need to write a blog post on this and post it.
I think you do.
Okay.
You do. Yes, you totally do. What I think it dovetails nicely, though, even into the next question, which is, what do you think about the future of marketing automation and marketing operations? So, Jason or Sydney, I'll open it up to either of you if you guys have thoughts or opinions on that question from Daniela.
I've got a lot, so Sydney, I'll let you speak up anything that you've got so that I don't monopolize.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics. Like I said, ops and funnel tracking is like my jam. I just live in Salesforce and Marketo and HubSpot. That's also my background, so that's probably why I like it so much. But at a high level, marketing ops and marketing automation, I think you'll start to see a strategic function actually form. However, that strategic function needs to understand sales. They need to understand marketing. They need to understand financial business acumen of how the business actually makes money, how they grow, all of that type of thing. And I feel like they'll start to be a strategic function, likely under a COO that operates strategically and powers the business with insights from all of the data and not just marketing ops, sales ops, all the tools you're using. That's what I think we're moving into. I think RevOps tried to be that, but they're still so tactical in the weeds. I think we have to just separate strategic versus tactical and then mentor people up to that strategic level. This is not a knock at RevOps. I'm obsessed with RevOps. I love RevOps.
No, it's funny you said that because we got engaged in a conversation at Rev Genius and with some of our partners and community sessions last year around the idea of a chief go-to-market officer. And every time that I spoke on a panel or something like that about that, I took a similar position, namely that I think it's a game of semantics that we're playing. Some would argue that it was the COO that was supposed to do this. Of course, COO as a role has been in decline for a decade plus. Some would say that was the vision around a CRO. Then we started, promoting VPs of sales into the role with, understandably not that more broader based background. And so the CRO role has, shifted into, kind of what it is that we know. On the growth side of things, which is what I, call myself more than anything else, that was certainly the vision there. And so whatever you want to call it, whatever, RevOps, any of the other monikers, I think it's the same thing. And I think the struggle most people have, and the reason why we play this hot potato game of, naming, is it's so hard to find these people. And, the reason why, I sort of naturally inclined into it is because I'm an entrepreneur. And so I've run and started my own businesses, and I didn't have a choice but to have that holistic vision of what's going on across the entire company and how does this lead to revenue and profitability. But it's hard to find those people. And I'm here to tell you, you probably don't want to go and hunt for entrepreneurs to do that, because the saying and the moniker that we make terrible employees is absolutely true. We don't like to shut up and get in line, and we have our own ways we want to do with things and all of that stuff. And so, especially for large organizations, I don't think that's a great answer, but it does speak to the challenge that's in there of trying to track down who these people are and how do you get to that diverse background and that holistic understanding of things.
No, I agree. Well, we are right at time. And I know we have, it looks like one more question. Sydney, I will flip it to you. And for those that need to drop, I hate to just leave one question hanging. If we had, I would normally just say, we'll answer them.
Let's do it.
Do you foresee B2B companies leveraging LinkedIn Lives and webinars more or less in 2024, and why? This is from Rob.
I'm going to give you the "it depends" answer, and I'm going to tell you why. If companies have already have a webinar program or something built into their strategy, I think that it will increase in different formats. I think YouTube Live, LinkedIn Live. I think that there might actually be less lives and more just post-production, like pre-recorded post-production, like built for like a non-live experience. Honestly, that's one of the things that we're doing. Our news content series is not going to be live. It's going to be produced and like executed and tailored a little bit more, so we get more, I would say, structured content out of it, specifically structured for YouTube. So it depends. It's a hard statement for me to draw a line.
I think relative to, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think the key to the "it depends" on that side that you were alluding to is that one of those two priorities at this time. And so if that's a upshot of a prioritized and well thought through strategy, and you've said, hey, this is one of the top two things, we want to do more, webinar, live, whether that or post-production type events, then yeah, you obviously need to lean into it, but it shouldn't be, the activity driving the initiative. It should be the initiative and the strategy behind it driving the activity.
And the measurement of success, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, thank you both, Jason and Sydney. I really appreciate you guys joining us today for this webinar. Great conversation, great questions from the audience. We really appreciate everyone joining us today. Be on the lookout for the recording as well. And we appreciate you all. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, guys.